I'm Lieutenant Commander Virginia Vale, 33. I earned my SEAL Trident at 26 and spent nearly a decade running operations most people only read about in redacted reports. For years, I gave everything, discipline, loyalty, and every ounce of endurance, to serve the uniform and the people wearing it beside me. But when I was reassigned after an injury and treated like background noise, asked to pour coffee in a room I'd once briefed from, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who you really were? If you have, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened that day in the briefing room, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to prove your worth in silence, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about staying calm, standing tall, and reclaiming respect. What happened next might surprise you. I grew up knowing what discipline looked like. My father, Admiral Lucan Vale, retired with 32 years of service and a reputation for running the tightest ship in the Pacific Fleet. My mother, Commander Elise Vale, spent 2 decades in the Navy Nurse Corps, moving through field hospitals and carrier sick bays with the same calm precision she brought to our dinner table. In our house, excuses were polished away like tarnish on brass. You showed up, you performed, you improved. That was the standard. I entered the Naval Academy at 18 with a single goal: earn my place through merit, not legacy. My father never pulled strings, and I never asked him to. I studied reconnaissance and underwater demolition, drawn to the kind of work that required absolute focus and zero margin for error. When the SEAL integration program opened to women, I was among the first to volunteer. The training was designed to break you down to your most honest self. Cold water, sleep deprivation, endless physical punishment. I learned that my body could endure more than my mind believed possible, and that the only way through was forward. I earned my Trident at 26. The ceremony was brief, professional. My father shook my hand. My mother smiled quietly. That night, I set the pin on my dresser and stared at it for a long time, feeling the weight of what it meant. Not pride, exactly. Responsibility. My call sign came 3 years later during Operation Sable Cross, a joint task force extraction in hostile territory. Our intel had placed a captured recon team in a compound near the Syrian border. The mission window was tight. I led the breach team through a subterranean canal system, navigating by infrared in near total darkness. We pulled out 7 men, including a young Army major who would later make general. Command started calling me Reaper Zero after that. The name stuck. Then came the injury. A training accident during a high-altitude water insertion. My knee shattered on impact, 3 surgeries later, and a medical board review that ended my field career. I was reassigned to Joint Operations Intelligence Command, a desk job with a view of the Potomac and a supervisor who had never heard of Operation Sable Cross. Lieutenant Colonel Mason Holt was Army through and through, a man who wore his rank like armor and his opinions like medals. He was 39, fit, confident, and entirely uninterested in my service record. Our first meeting set the tone. "Commander Vale," he said, glancing at my file without opening it. "Welcome to the team. We run a tight operation here. I expect punctuality, attention to detail, and a team-first attitude." "Understood, sir." He leaned back in his chair. "You'll be supporting intel coordination, briefing prep, data synthesis, liaison work. Nothing glamorous, but it's essential." I nodded. "Supporting. Not leading. Not analyzing. Supporting. Any questions?" "No, sir." He smiled then, a practiced expression. "Good. I think you'll fit in just fine." I left his office and walked to my assigned cubicle, a narrow space near the copy room. Major Tessa Yoon, an Air Force officer with sharp eyes and a sharper sense of humor, watched me unpack my files. "How'd it go?" she asked. "Professional," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "That bad?" I didn't answer. The command culture revealed itself slowly, like rust under paint. The officers were competent, experienced, mostly male. They worked hard, respected the chain of command, and treated me with the kind of casual dismissal reserved for administrative staff. During briefings, I was asked to take notes. During prep meetings, I was asked to organize materials. Once, during a joint strategy session, a captain asked me to make fresh coffee. "We've got a long afternoon ahead," he said with a grin. "Might as well keep everyone sharp." I made the coffee. Lieutenant Colonel Holt called me Miss Vale more often than Commander. When I corrected him the first time, he laughed it off. "Old habit," he said. "No disrespect intended." The second time, he nodded absently and continued talking. The third time, I stopped correcting him. My analytical briefings were filed and forgotten. Twice, I watched other officers present my work as their own, repackaged with minor edits and delivered with confidence. I said nothing. Documentation mattered more than confrontation. I kept copies of everything: emails, reports, meeting notes. Precision over emotion. Evidence over outrage. Major Tessa Yoon noticed. She was careful, deliberate, never openly critical of the command structure. But in the quiet moments between meetings, she let me know I wasn't alone. "They don't realize who's in the room yet," she said one afternoon, her voice low. "Does it matter?" I asked. Eventually. I wasn't sure I believed her, but I appreciated the sentiment. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in late September. Joint Ops Strategy Briefing, senior staff from Army, Navy, and Air Force. The kind of meeting that required preparation, coordination, and a clear presentation of intelligence priorities. Lieutenant Colonel Holt assigned me to help with setup. "We need someone to make sure everything runs smoothly," he said. "You've got an eye for detail." "Yes, sir." The conference room filled slowly. Colonels, commanders, a few majors. I arranged the briefing packets, checked the projector, ensured the coffee station was stocked. As officers entered, a captain I didn't recognize gestured toward the coffee. "Serve the men first," he said with a grin. I served the men first. I moved through the room with steady hands, pouring coffee into mugs, refilling water pitchers, making sure no one had to ask twice. No one thanked me. No one made eye contact. I was part of the furniture, a fixture designed to facilitate their comfort. Then Major General Rowan Keane entered the room. He was 55, silver-haired, with the kind of command presence that didn't require volume. He moved to the head of the table, glanced at the briefing materials, and started to speak. Then he stopped. His eyes locked on my hand, the one holding the coffee pot. Specifically, on the ring I wore on my right hand. The seal trident, small and understated, set in brushed steel. "That ring," he said, his voice cutting through the room's low hum. "Is that Reaper Zero?" The room went silent. Every head turned toward me. Lieutenant Colonel Holt's face went pale. The captain who'd asked me to serve coffee looked confused. Major General Keane stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Commander Vale," he said slowly, reading my name tape. "Virginia Vale. Reaper Zero. Operation Sable Cross." I set the coffee pot down carefully. "Yes, sir." He exhaled, something between a laugh and a sigh. "You pulled my recon team out of that compound. 6 of us made it home because of you." "7, sir," I said quietly. "There were 7. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Lieutenant Colonel Holt. "Colonel, why is Commander Vale pouring coffee?" Holt opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "She was helping with setup, sir." Standard, Keane repeated, his tone flat. "Commander Vale is a Navy SEAL. A decorated combat veteran. And you have her serving coffee." "I didn't. She's conducting the intelligence briefing," Keane said. "Right now." The room remained silent. I felt every eye on me, the weight of judgment and curiosity and something else I couldn't name. I walked to the front of the room, opened my briefing folder, and connected my tablet to the projector. I delivered the brief with clipped clarity, no hesitation, no embellishment. Threat assessments, operational priorities, resource allocation. 30 minutes of distilled intelligence, presented with the precision I'd learned in cold water and hostile territory. When I finished, Major General Keane nodded once. "Thank you, Commander. That's exactly what we needed." I returned to my seat. The room resumed its normal rhythm, but the atmosphere had shifted. Lieutenant Colonel Holt avoided my gaze for the rest of the meeting. Lieutenant Colonel Holt found me 2 hours later in the corridor outside my cubicle. His posture was stiff, his expression carefully neutral. "Commander Vale," he said. A moment. I stopped walking. "Sir." He glanced around, ensuring we were alone. "I wanted to apologize for this morning. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't realize your full background. My file's been on your desk for 6 weeks, sir." His jaw tightened. "I should have read it more carefully." I said nothing. "Going forward," he continued, "I'll make sure you're given assignments more appropriate to your experience." "Understood, sir." He waited, perhaps expecting more. Gratitude, maybe. Or reassurance. I offered neither. After a moment, he nodded and walked away. Major Tessa Yoon appeared at my shoulder, a faint smirk on her face. "Guess the coffee wasn't all you served," she said. I didn't smile. "I just did the brief." "You did more than that." She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You reminded them what they forgot." That night, in my apartment overlooking the river, I sat at my desk and stared at 2 objects, my sealed trident pin and my military ID badge. I'd spent years earning the first and a lifetime living up to the second. Symbols of endurance, not ego. My father had once told me that the uniform wasn't a costume you wore to impress people. It was a responsibility you carried so others didn't have to. I thought about the briefing, the coffee, the looks on their faces when Major General Keane recognized my ring. There was no satisfaction in it. No sense of triumph. Just the quiet confirmation that the work spoke louder than the whispers. I opened my laptop and began drafting my next intelligence assessment. Somewhere in the building, Lieutenant Colonel Holt was probably doing the same. Tomorrow, we'd return to the same conference rooms, the same meetings, the same chain of command. But something had shifted, a recalibration of expectations that couldn't be undone. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Your father saw the briefing notes. He's proud. So am I." I set the phone down without replying. Pride wasn't the goal. Performance was. The following week, Major General Keane requested a private meeting. I arrived at his office early, as always. He gestured for me to sit, then handed me a folder. "Joint Intelligence Tasking Lead," he said. "New position. Multi-branch coordination, strategic assessment, direct reporting line to my office. I want you for it." I opened the folder, scanning the position description. It was the kind of role I'd been preparing for my entire career. The kind of role that demanded both tactical expertise and strategic vision. "This bypasses Lieutenant Colonel Holt's command structure," I said. "Correct. That's going to create friction." "I'm aware." Keane leaned back in his chair. "Do you want the position or not?" I looked at him, this general who'd been pulled from a compound in hostile territory by a team I'd led through a canal in the dark. His recon team had survived because I'd refused to accept the mission parameters as written. I'd found another way in, another way out. That was what reconnaissance meant. See the terrain. Adapt. Move. "Yes, sir," I said. "I want it." "Good." He closed the folder. "You start Monday." I left his office and walked back through the building, past the conference rooms and the cubicles and the officers who no longer asked me to pour their coffee. Major Tessa Yoon caught up with me near the stairwell. "I heard," she said. "Congratulations." "Thank you." "Holt's going to lose his mind." "Probably." She grinned. "I'll make popcorn." But she was wrong. Lieutenant Colonel Holt didn't lose his mind. He did something worse. He complied with the transition orders while systematically obstructing the workflow. Paperwork delays, communication breakdowns, sudden schedule conflicts. Small frictions that accumulated into operational drag. I documented everything. Every missed deadline, every unanswered email, every meeting he failed to attend. I built a file with the same attention to detail I'd brought to mission planning. Precision over emotion. Evidence over accusation. Major General Keane noticed within 3 weeks. "Commander Vale," he said during a briefing update, "I'm seeing delays in the intel pipeline. Where's the bottleneck?" I handed him my file. He read it in silence, his expression darkening. When he finished, he closed the folder and looked at me. "You didn't raise your voice." "No, sir. You just let the record speak." "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly. "The room finally heard you." 2 weeks later, Lieutenant Colonel Holt was reassigned to a logistics command in Okinawa. The official reason was operational restructuring. The unofficial reason sat in a file folder on Major General Keen's desk. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I restructured the intelligence workflow, implemented new data-sharing protocols, and built a team that prioritized competence over comfort. Major Tessayun became my deputy. Together, we reformed the way Joint Operations Intelligence functioned, breaking down the silos between branches and creating systems that rewarded accuracy over ego. The base whispered about me. The officer who'd served coffee at her own briefing. The SEAL who'd stayed silent while they underestimated her. The commander who'd rebuilt an entire command structure without raising her voice. I ignored the gossip. There was too much work to do. Late one night, alone in my office, I received an email from my father. Restraint is a weapon. You've learned to wield it well. I printed the email and pinned it above my desk, next to the mission parameters from Operation Sable Cross. Reminders of what endurance looked like. What discipline accomplished. Respect wasn't ceremony. It was conduct. And conduct in uniform was everything. Leadership brought skepticism the way altitude brought thin air. Inevitable, manageable, something you adjusted to without complaint. The officers who'd once ignored my briefings now attended my meetings with notepads and questions. The culture shift wasn't immediate, but it was measurable. I tracked it the way I tracked everything else, with data, documentation, and deliberate follow-through. My first priority was establishing clear communication channels between Army, Navy, and Air Force intelligence divisions. The old system relied on email chains and personal relationships, which meant information moved slowly and inconsistently. I implemented a shared database with standardized reporting formats and mandatory update windows. It wasn't popular. Change never was. Commander Vale, a Navy captain, said during one of our first coordination meetings, "This new system adds extra steps to our workflow." It adds accountability, I said. If that feels like extra work, we need to discuss your current process. He didn't bring it up again. Major Tessayun handled the Air Force integration with characteristic efficiency. She was a natural diplomat, able to translate my directives into language that felt collaborative rather than imposed. Where I saw systems and structures, she saw people and relationships. Together, we covered the full spectrum of command. "You're the hammer," she said one afternoon, reviewing our latest directive. "I'm the cushion." That makes it sound like I'm combative. "You're direct," she corrected. "There's a difference." I accepted that. Directness was efficient. It eliminated ambiguity and forced clarity. If people found that uncomfortable, they could adjust. The whispers continued, though they'd evolved. I was no longer the desk SEAL or the officer who poured coffee. Now I was the one who restructured workflows, who held people accountable, who expected results over excuses. Some admired it. Others resented it. I didn't track opinions. I tracked outcomes. 3 months into my new role, Major General Keen called me to his office. "How's the integration going?" he asked. "We're at 72% compliance with the new protocols," I said. "Remaining gaps are in legacy systems that require technical upgrades. Any personnel issues?" "Define issues." He smiled slightly. "Resistance. Pushback. The usual friction that comes with change. Nothing that affects operational performance," I said. "Some officers preferred the old system because it required less documentation. They've adapted. Voluntarily. Eventually." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You know what your reputation is?" "I don't pay attention to reputation, sir." "You should," he said. "Because it's this. Competent, demanding, and completely uninterested in being liked." I considered that. "Is that a problem?" "No," he said. "It's rare. Most officers at your level are still trying to be popular. You're trying to be effective. Effectiveness builds respect, sir. Popularity builds committees." He laughed, a genuine sound. "Where'd you learn that?" "My father." "Admiral Vale?" "Yes, sir." He nodded. "That makes sense. Keep doing what you're doing, Commander. The results speak for themselves." I left his office feeling something close to validation, though I wouldn't have called it that. My father had taught me that external approval was irrelevant if your own standards weren't met. I held myself to a simple metric. Did the work improve the mission? If yes, continue. If no, adjust. The base continued to whisper. I continued to ignore it. Major Tessa Yoon, however, had a different approach. They're calling you the Ice Commander, she said one evening as we reviewed mission briefs. Creative. They mean it as a compliment. Do they? She shrugged. Depends on who's talking. Some people appreciate the clarity. Others think you're cold. I'm not cold. I'm focused. To them, that's the same thing. I set down my pen and looked at her. Do you think I'm cold? She considered the question carefully. I think you don't waste energy on performance. You don't soften your language to make people comfortable. You don't apologize for being competent. Some people interpret that as coldness. I interpret it as honesty. Thank you. You're welcome. She returned to her notes. For what it's worth, I'd rather work for someone honest than someone nice. That distinction mattered. Niceness was a social lubricant, useful in certain contexts, but irrelevant to mission success. Honesty was structural. It built trust through consistency, not charm. The transformation wasn't revenge. It was restoration. I wasn't punishing the officers who dismissed me or proving anything to Lieutenant Colonel Holt. I was building a system that functioned independent of personality, bias, or ego. A system where performance determined advancement, where competence earned respect, where the work mattered more than the whispers. Every mission's success hardened my confidence into something quieter than pride. Assurance, maybe. The knowledge that discipline and precision produced results. That restraint, properly applied, was its own form of power. My mother called one evening, her voice warm and familiar. How's the new position? She asked. Demanding. Good. You've never been comfortable when things are easy. Is that a compliment? She laughed. It's an observation. Your father and I always knew you'd find your way. We just didn't know it would look like this. Like what? Quiet authority, she said. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. I thought about that after we hung up. Quiet authority. It sounded right. Not the volume of command, but the gravity of it. The kind of presence that made people stand straighter, work harder, expect more from themselves. I'd earned my trident in cold water and hostile territory. I'd earned my call sign leading extractions under fire. Now I was earning something else, the right to lead without needing to prove I belonged in the room. Late one night, alone in my office, I reviewed the intelligence reports from our latest joint operation. Clean execution, 0 casualties, mission objectives exceeded. The kind of outcome that resulted from clear communication, precise coordination, and a team that understood their roles. I sent a brief commendation email to the officers involved. Professional, specific, devoid of unnecessary praise. They'd done their jobs well. That deserved acknowledgement, not celebration. Major Tessa Yoon appeared in my doorway. Still here? She asked. Finishing up. It's almost midnight. Then I'm almost finished. She smiled. You ever take a break? When the work's done. The work's never done, Virginia. It was the first time she'd used my first name. I looked up at her surprised. Sorry, she said. Too familiar? No, I said. It's fine. She stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever get tired? Of what? This. She gestured around the room. The constant proving. The endless documentation. The weight of being the first woman in every room who's earned what you've earned. I considered her question carefully. I don't think about it as proving. I think about it as performing. That's not an answer. Yes, I said quietly. I get tired. But you don't stop. No. Why not? I looked at the reports on my desk, the mission briefs, the coordination protocols. Because stopping means someone else has to carry it. And I didn't earn this position to pass the weight to someone else. She nodded slowly. That's what I thought you'd say. Is that wrong? No, she said. It's just lonely. She left before I could respond. I sat in the silence of my office, surrounded by the architecture of command. She was right. It was lonely. But loneliness was a byproduct of leadership, not a failure of it. You couldn't build something solid while constantly seeking company. You built it in the quiet hours, with steady hands and clear eyes, and you trusted that the foundation would hold. Restraint was power. Discipline was freedom. And command, real command, was the willingness to carry weight others couldn't see. I turned off my office light and walked to my car through the empty parking lot. Above me, stars scattered across a clear sky, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere, in another office, another young officer was working late, building something that mattered, carrying weight they'd earned the right to hold. The work continued. It always did. 6 months passed. The intelligence coordination system I'd built became standard operating procedure across the Joint Command. Officers who'd initially resisted the changes now defended them to their superiors. Major Tessa Yoon's diplomatic touch had transformed skeptics into advocates, and the mission success rate reflected the improved workflow. I was promoted to Commander 05 at 34. The ceremony was brief and professional, exactly as I preferred. My father attended in dress uniform, my mother beside him. Major General Keane pinned the new insignia to my collar. "Well earned, Commander Vale," he said quietly. "Thank you, sir." That evening, my parents took me to dinner at a quiet restaurant near the base. My father ordered wine, which he rarely did. My mother smiled more than usual. "You've built something impressive," my father said. "The kind of system that outlasts individual leadership." "That's the goal," I said. "Make yourself obsolete by making the structure solid." He raised his glass. "To structural integrity." We drank. The wine was good. The conversation was easy. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel something close to satisfaction. The next day, I received an unexpected email. The sender was Lieutenant Colonel Mason Holt, now stationed at a logistics command in Okinawa. The subject line read, "Overdue." I opened it with caution. "Commander Vale, I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing to you from Okinawa, where I've spent the past 6 months reconsidering a lot of things about leadership, respect, and my own failures. I owe you an apology. A real one, not the bureaucratic placeholder I offered in that hallway. I misjudged you from the moment you walked into my office. I saw your reassignment from field duty and assumed you were finished, washed up, assigned to a desk because you couldn't hack it anymore. I didn't look at your record. I didn't ask about your service. I didn't treat you with the respect your rank and experience demanded. That was ego, plain and simple. Ego got in the way of rank, competence, and basic professionalism. What happened in that briefing room wasn't just embarrassing. It was a failure of leadership on my part. You didn't need General Keane to defend you. You were already proving yourself every day. I just wasn't paying attention. I've learned a lot in this assignment. Some of it the hard way. If you're ever willing to take a call, I'd appreciate the chance to say this directly. If not, I understand. Either way, I wanted you to know, you were right. Respect isn't ceremony. It's conduct. I'm working on mine. Respectfully, Mason Holt, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army. I read the email twice. Then I closed my laptop and stared at the wall of my office, processing the words. An apology, genuine and specific. Accountability without excuses. It was more than I'd expected and less than I needed. Major Tessa Yoon noticed my expression when I emerged for our afternoon meeting. "Something wrong?" she asked. Holt sent me an email. Her eyebrows rose. Holt from yes. What did he want? To apologize. She leaned back in her chair. Huh. Didn't see that coming. Neither did I. You going to respond? I considered that. I don't know yet. Do you want to? I'm not sure it matters. She studied me for a moment. You know what I think? What? I think you're someone who finishes things properly. Even uncomfortable things. She was right. Loose threads bothered me. Unresolved conflicts created drag in the system. I didn't need closure for emotional reasons, but I respected the principle of completing exchanges with clarity. 2 days later, I called him. The connection took a moment to establish, routing through military communication systems. When Lieutenant Colonel Holt answered, his voice was cautious. "Commander Vale, thank you for calling. Your email was thorough," I said. I appreciated the specificity. I meant every word. "I believe you." There was a pause. He seemed uncertain how to proceed. "I've been thinking about what happened," he continued. "Not just the briefing, but everything leading up to it. The way I ran that command. the assumptions I made. And I was wrong. About you, about leadership, about what competence looks like. Competence looks like performance, I said. It's measurable. I know that now. Good. Another pause. Can I ask you something? He said. Go ahead. How did you stay so calm? All those months, being dismissed, sidelined, treated like administrative support. You never lost your composure. Discipline, I said simply. Reacting emotionally would have confirmed their assumptions. Staying composed forced them to confront their own bias. That's strategic. That's survival. He exhaled slowly. I'm sorry, Commander. Truly. I accept your apology, Colonel. Thank you. But apologies don't rebuild trust, I said. Conduct does. If you've learned what you say you've learned, prove it in how you lead going forward. I will. Then we're finished here. Understood. And Commander. Yes. For what it's worth, the officers here ask about you. They've heard about the intelligence system you built. It's becoming a model for other commands. That's the goal, I said. Make the work matter more than the person. You've done that. I ended the call and sat quietly for a moment. Closure wasn't satisfaction. It was completion. A chapter finished, a file closed, a loose thread tied off. Major Tessa Yoon found me later that afternoon. How'd it go? She asked. Fine. Just fine. He apologized. I accepted. We moved on. She smiled. Most people would want more than that. I'm not most people. No, she agreed. You're not. That night, alone in my apartment, I thought about the call. About Lieutenant Colonel Holt's voice, the uncertainty in it, the genuine regret. About my own response, measured and professional. About the strange mathematics of forgiveness, where the equation balanced not through emotion, but through acknowledgement. My mother had once told me that grace wasn't about feelings. It was about choosing to release weight you didn't need to carry anymore. I wasn't sure I'd shown grace exactly, but I'd chosen not to carry his failure forward. That seemed close enough. I opened my laptop and drafted a brief email to Major General Keane, updating him on the quarterly intelligence metrics. The numbers were strong. Mission success rates continued to climb. The system worked because it was built on principles, not personalities. Before I closed the computer, I allowed myself one moment of reflection. I thought about the briefing room, the coffee pot, the moment when everything shifted. Not because of what I did, but because someone finally recognized what I'd already proven. The transformation wasn't revenge. It was restoration. Not of reputation, but of function. I'd rebuilt a system where competence determined value, where performance earned respect, where the work mattered more than the whispers. And in doing so, I'd learned something my father never explicitly taught but always demonstrated, that the strongest response to disrespect wasn't anger or vindication. It was simply continuing to be excellent until the room had no choice but to notice. 2 years passed with the steady rhythm of operational command. I led intelligence coordination for joint operations across 3 theaters, supported major strategic initiatives, and mentored 15 junior officers through their first combat deployment preparations. Major Tessa Yoon was promoted to lieutenant colonel and transferred to the NATO Intelligence Division in Brussels. We maintained contact through secure channels and occasional video calls. How's Europe? I asked during one of our quarterly check-ins. Bureaucratic, she said, but functional. You trained me well. You trained yourself. I learned from the best. I didn't respond to that. Compliments made me uncomfortable, not because I didn't appreciate them, but because they shifted focus from the work to the person. The work was what mattered. My father retired fully at 65, moving with my mother to a small house near Annapolis. They invited me for dinner once a month, and I attended when operational tempo allowed. The conversations were easy, familiar. My father asked about systems and structures. My mother asked about people and rest. I answered honestly, though I suspected my mother knew I wasn't sleeping enough. You're running yourself thin, she said one evening. I'm managing fine. That's not the same as thriving. I'm not built for thriving, I said. I'm built for functioning. She gave me a look that held 3 decades of nursing experience and maternal intuition. Those aren't opposites, Virginia. I changed the subject. In the spring of my 36th year, Major General Rowan Keane announced his retirement. The ceremony was formal, attended by senior officers from across the Defense Department. He'd served for 33 years, led operations on 4 continents, shaped policy at the highest levels. When he spoke to the assembled crowd, his voice carried the weight of experience and the lightness of completion. Leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room, he said. It's about building a room where smart people can do their best work. If I've done that, I've succeeded. After the ceremony, he found me near the reception area. Commander Vale, he said. Walk with me. We moved through the building's corridors, away from the crowd. He led me to an empty office overlooking the Potomac. I wanted to thank you before I left, he said. For what, sir? For reminding me what real competence looks like. You didn't need reminding. Maybe not. But I needed the example. He looked out the window. That day in the briefing room, when I recognized your ring, that wasn't just about you. It was about everyone in that room learning what actual authority looks like. I just did my job. Exactly, he said. You didn't demand respect. You didn't argue for it. You just performed at such a high level that respect became inevitable. That's rare. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. This is for you, he said. Don't open it until later. Sir, that's an order, Commander. I took the envelope. He shook my hand, his grip firm and brief, then left without another word. That evening, I opened the envelope in my apartment. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. Commander Vale, you pulled me out of that compound 6 years ago. I've spent every year since trying to serve with the same quiet fire you showed that night. Now it's your turn to carry the torch forward. Still serving with quiet fire. That's command. With respect and admiration, M.G. Rowan Keane, U.S. Army, Ret. I read it twice, then placed it in a drawer with my other meaningful correspondence. Quiet fire. The phrase resonated. Not the loud combustion of rage or ego, but the steady burn of discipline and purpose. The kind of fire that didn't announce itself, but warmed everything around it. The next morning, I was called to a meeting with the Deputy Director of Defense Intelligence. The position being discussed was Deputy Commander of Joint Intelligence Operations, a role that would oversee coordination across all military branches and interface directly with national security leadership. We're considering you for the position, the Deputy Director said. Your record speaks for itself. The question is whether you want it. What's the operational scope? I asked. Global. Multi-theater coordination, strategic assessment, direct advisory role to the Joint Chiefs. Timeline. 6 months transition, then full assumption of duties. I thought about the years I'd spent building systems, mentoring officers, proving that competence could reshape culture. This position would scale that impact exponentially. I want it, I said. Good, he said. We'll begin the formal vetting process next week. I left the meeting and returned to my office, where a stack of intelligence briefs waited for review. The work continued, as it always did. But something had shifted. Not in the work itself, but in my relationship to it. I was no longer rebuilding. I was building forward. Major Tessa Yoon called that evening from Brussels. I heard about the promotion track, she said. Congratulations. How did you hear already? NATO intelligence community is small. Word travels. It's not confirmed yet. It will be, she said. You've earned it 10 times over. We talked for 20 minutes about operational protocols and personnel transitions. Before we hung up, she asked me a question. Are you happy, Virginia? I paused. That's not really the metric I use. I know. But I'm asking anyway. I thought about it carefully. I'm satisfied. The work is meaningful. The impact is measurable. I'm doing what I was trained to do. That's not an answer. Yes, I said finally. I'm happy. In the way that matters to me. Good, she said. You deserve that. After we disconnected, I stood at my apartment window and looked out over the city. Lights scattered across the landscape, each one representing people living their lives, making their choices, carrying their own weight. I thought about the path that had brought me here. The cold water training, the canal extraction, the injury, the desk job, the coffee pot, the briefing room, the transformation. Not revenge. Restoration. I'd rebuilt myself not through anger or vindication, but through the steady application of discipline and competence. I'd proven that respect couldn't be demanded or borrowed. It had to be earned through performance, maintained through consistency, and demonstrated through results. My father's words echoed in my memory. The uniform isn't a costume. It's a responsibility. I'd carried that responsibility through hostile territory and bureaucratic resistance, through dismissal and recognition, through injury and reconstruction. I'd carried it when no one was watching and when everyone was. And in carrying it properly, I'd created space for others to do the same. The next generation of officers would stand a little straighter because I'd refused to bend. They'd demand respect because I'd shown them how to earn it. They'd build systems that outlasted personalities because I'd demonstrated the architecture. That was legacy. Not the stories people told about the briefing room or the coffee pot, but the systems that remained after I moved on. The standards that held firm when I wasn't there to enforce them. I returned to my desk and opened my laptop. There was always more work to do. Intelligence briefs to review, protocols to refine, officers to mentor. The work never ended, but that was the point. You didn't serve until the mission was complete. You served because the mission mattered. Restraint was power. Discipline was freedom. And command, real command, was the willingness to carry weight others couldn't see, for reasons that wouldn't be fully understood until you were gone. I pulled up the first brief and began reading. Somewhere across the ocean, Lieutenant Colonel Tessa Yoon was doing the same. Somewhere in Okinawa, Lieutenant Colonel Mason Holt was learning to lead differently. Somewhere in Annapolis, my parents were sleeping peacefully, proud of a daughter who'd found her own way to serve. And here, in this office overlooking the Potomac, I continued the work. Quietly. Precisely. With the kind of fire that burned steady and long. Still serving. Still building. Still proving that excellence, properly applied, was its own reward. The vetting process took 4 months instead of 6. Background checks, security clearances, interviews with senior leadership across all branches. I answered every question with the same precision I brought to intelligence briefs. No embellishment, no false modesty. Just facts and demonstrated capability. The confirmation came on a Thursday afternoon. Deputy Commander of Joint Intelligence Operations, effective immediately. The ceremony was scheduled for the following week, but the work began that evening. I received briefing books on active operations in 7 theaters, classified assessments of emerging threats, and personnel files for the 100+ officers who would report through my chain of command. I read through the night. The ceremony itself was professional and efficient. My parents attended, along with a delegation of officers I'd worked with over the years. Lieutenant Colonel Tessa Yoon flew in from Brussels, citing essential NATO coordination as her official reason for the trip. We both knew better. Couldn't miss this, she said quietly before the ceremony began. It's just a promotion. It's vindication, she corrected. No, I said. It's continuation. The presiding officer, a 3-star admiral I'd briefed dozens of times, kept his remarks brief. Commander Vale has demonstrated exceptional competence in joint operations intelligence coordination. Her systems have improved mission success rates across multiple theaters. Her leadership has set new standards for inter-service cooperation. It is my honor to promote her to the position of Deputy Commander, Joint Intelligence Operations. New insignia. New responsibilities. Same work, larger scale. Afterward, my father approached me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Proud of you, he said simply. Thank you. Your mother wants pictures. We took the required photographs. Professional shots for the official record, informal ones for the family archive. My mother hugged me, something she rarely did in public. You've come a long way from that briefing room, she whispered. I was always here, I said. The room just finally noticed. That evening, a small group gathered for dinner at a restaurant near the base. Tessa, my parents, 3 senior officers who'd become something close to friends over the years. The conversation was easy, marked by the comfortable rhythm of people who respected each other's work. Captain Rafi Delgado, now a lieutenant commander, raised his glass. To Commander Vale, he said, Who taught us all that quiet confidence beats loud ego every single time? I'll drink to that, Tessa added. They drink. I nodded my thanks, uncomfortable with the attention, but recognizing the sincerity behind it. Later, after my parents had returned to their hotel and the other officers had departed, Tessa and I walked along the river. The night was clear, unseasonably warm for October. You did it, she said. Did what? Changed the entire culture of joint intelligence operations. Built systems that will outlast both of us. Proved that a woman could not only survive in this environment, but reshape it entirely. I just did my job. Stop, she said, her voice sharper than usual. Stop diminishing what you've accomplished. You earned this. You fought for this. Not with complaints or demands, but with performance so exceptional that they had no choice but to recognize it. I stopped walking. Why does that bother you? Because you won't let yourself acknowledge it. She turned to face me. Virginia, you're allowed to be proud. You're allowed to feel satisfied. You're allowed to recognize that you've achieved something extraordinary. Pride interferes with performance. No, she said. False pride does. Real pride, earned pride, fuels better performance. It gives you confidence to take bigger risks, make harder decisions, lead with more authority. I considered her words. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent so many years focused on the work itself that I'd forgotten to acknowledge the meaning behind it. I'll think about it, I said finally. She smiled. That's all I ask. We continued walking. Ahead, the city lights reflected off the river's surface, creating patterns that shifted with the current. Constant motion, constant change, but the river itself remained. What's next for you? Tessa asked. The work. Always the work. What else is there? She laughed. Life, Virginia. Relationships. Rest. Joy. I have those things. Do you? I didn't answer immediately. The truth was complicated. I had my parents, my colleagues, the satisfaction of work well done. But personal relationships beyond that? Time for rest? Moments of uncomplicated joy? Those were scarcer. I have enough, I said finally. Enough isn't the same as fulfilled. It is for me. She let it go, but I could tell she disagreed. We walked in silence for a while, each processing our own thoughts. The next morning, I reported to my new office. Larger than my previous space, with windows overlooking the command center. My predecessor had left detailed transition notes, organized with military precision. I spent the first week learning systems, meeting key personnel, and identifying areas for improvement. The second week, I implemented my first change, mandatory cross-branch coordination meetings, held weekly, with standardized reporting requirements. The pushback was immediate but manageable. I'd learned that resistance to change was natural, but resistance to demonstrated success was rare. By the third week, the meetings were running smoothly. Officers who'd initially complained about the additional workload began seeing the benefits. Information flowed faster. Redundancies disappeared. Mission planning improved. I documented everything as always. One afternoon, I received a package by a military courier. The return address was listed as Okinawa. Inside was a brief note and a small wooden box. Commander Vale, I heard about your promotion. This belonged to my grandfather, who served in the Pacific during World War II. It's a challenge coin from his unit. He gave it to me when I made Major, told me to pass it along to an officer who embodied the values he fought to protect. I think he'd want you to have it. The inscription reads, Duty before distinction. That's you. Respectfully, Mason Holt, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army. I opened the box. The coin was worn, brass with a patina that spoke of decades of handling. On one side, an eagle. On the other, the words he'd mentioned. Duty before distinction. I placed it on my desk, next to my sealed trident pin and the note from General Keane. Objects that marked the journey, not as trophies, but as reminders. Duty came first. Always. That evening, I called my mother. How's the new position? She asked. Demanding. Satisfying. Good combination. Tessa thinks I should acknowledge my accomplishments more. She's not wrong. You agree with her? Virginia, my mother said gently, you've spent your entire life proving you belong. You've done that. Now it's time to recognize that you don't just belong. You lead. I'm working on it. I know you are. That's why I'm not worried. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and looked at the objects arranged there. The trident, the note, the coin, each one representing a different aspect of the same truth. That service meant carrying weight others couldn't see, for reasons they might never fully understand. But maybe, just maybe, it also meant allowing yourself to recognize the weight you'd already carried, to acknowledge the distance you'd traveled, to accept that you'd earned not just your position, but your peace. I wasn't there yet, but I was closer than I'd been in the briefing room, pouring coffee with a seal ring on my finger, waiting for someone to notice what I'd already proven. The transformation wasn't complete, but it was real, and that, for now, was enough. 5 years passed. I turned 41 in the same quiet way I'd marked every birthday, acknowledgement without celebration, gratitude without ceremony. The work had become something beyond career advancement. It was architecture now, the building of systems that would function long after I moved on. Lieutenant Colonel Tessa Yoon made full colonel and returned stateside to command an intelligence wing at Langley. We had lunch once a month, discussing operations with the ease of people who'd built trust through shared confidence. "You're different," she said during one of these lunches. "How so?" "Lighter," she said. "Still precise, still disciplined, but less rigid." "Age does that." "No," she corrected. "Acceptance does that." She was probably right. Somewhere in those 5 years, I'd stopped fighting gravity and learned to work with it instead. The systems I'd built were mature now, running smoothly across all branches of joint operations. My focus had shifted from construction to cultivation, ensuring the next generation of officers understood not just the protocols, but the principles behind them. I mentored 23 junior officers during those years. Taught them that competence was a language, that discipline created freedom, that respect couldn't be demanded but only earned through consistent excellence. Some learned faster than others. All of them learned. My father's health declined gradually. A series of small strokes, each one taking a piece of his sharpness, leaving behind a softer version of the man who'd shaped my understanding of duty. My mother cared for him with the same precision she'd brought to field hospitals, but I could see the toll it took. "He's proud of you," she told me during one of my visits. "I know." "No, I mean he tells me every day. Sometimes twice." The memory issues make him repeat himself, but the pride is constant. I sat with him that afternoon in their sunroom overlooking the water. He didn't always recognize me immediately, but once he did, his eyes cleared. "Commander," he said, using my rank the way other fathers might use endearments. "Admiral," I replied, following our old pattern. "How's the work?" "Steady." "Good. That's right. Keep it steady." He paused, searching for something. "Did I ever tell you about restraint?" "Many times." "It's a weapon," he said. "The kind that doesn't make noise but wins wars." "I remember." He nodded, satisfied, then drifted into quiet contemplation of the water. I sat with him for an hour, saying little, both of us comfortable in the silence that had always marked our relationship. He passed away 3 months later, peacefully, in the early morning. My mother called me at dawn. "He's gone," she said simply. I took emergency leave and flew to Annapolis. The funeral was military, formal, attended by officers who'd served with him across 3 decades. They told stories about his leadership, his precision, his unwavering commitment to duty. I listened to each one, recognizing the man they described, but knowing a different version. The father who'd taught me that excellence was quiet, that discipline built freedom, that service meant carrying weight no one else could see. During the reception, a retired captain approached me. "You're just like him," he said. "Thank you." That wasn't necessarily a compliment, he added gently. "Your father was brilliant, but he was also isolated. He carried everything himself. Never asked for help. That was his strength. It was also his limitation." I thought about that conversation for weeks afterward. My father had built an extraordinary career through discipline and confidence, but he'd done it alone. My mother had been his partner, but even she hadn't fully penetrated the walls he'd constructed around his sense of duty. Was I following the same pattern? Tessa thought so. During one of our lunches, she brought it up directly. "You're becoming him," she said. "My father." "Yes. Brilliant, competent, isolated." "I'm not isolated. I have colleagues, Mencio." "Professional relationships," she said. "What about personal ones?" "These are personal." "No," she said. "They're professional relationships with personal elements." "That's different." I set down my fork. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe there's more to life than operational success. Maybe excellence in command doesn't require sacrificing everything else." "I haven't sacrificed anything." "Haven't you?" She leaned forward. "When's the last time you did something just for yourself? Took a vacation that wasn't terminal leave for a family emergency? Spent time with someone who doesn't work in intelligence?" I couldn't answer immediately. "That's what I thought," she said, not unkindly. That conversation stayed with me. I found myself examining my life with the same analytical precision I brought to intelligence assessments. The picture that emerged was clear: exceptional professional competence, minimal personal connection. A life structured around duty, with little room for anything else. Was that wrong? My father had lived similarly. He'd been satisfied, fulfilled even. But the captain's words echoed, brilliant and isolated. I didn't have answers, but I recognized the question. 3 months after my father's death, I was offered a position as Director of Joint Intelligence Operations. A 2-star admiral billet, the highest position I'd realistically achieve without transitioning fully into policy and strategy roles that would take me away from operational intelligence. "Take the weekend to consider it," the Secretary of Defense told me. I didn't need a weekend. "I accept." "You're sure? This is the culmination of everything you've built. Once you're in this role, you'll be managing the managers, setting policy rather than implementing it." "I understand." "And you still want it?" "Yes, sir." The promotion ceremony was larger than previous ones. Dignitaries from all branches, representatives from allied nations, media coverage. My mother attended, dignified in black, still grieving but present for this moment. "Your father would have been so proud," she whispered before the ceremony. "He already was," I said. "I know. But he would have loved to see this." The presiding officer was a 4-star admiral who'd served with my father decades ago. "Virginia Vale represents the highest standards of military intelligence leadership," he said. "Her systems have revolutionized how our services share information and coordinate operations. Her mentorship has shaped a generation of officers. Her commitment to excellence has set a new standard for what competent leadership looks like. It is my distinct honor to promote her to Rear Admiral, Director of Joint Intelligence Operations." The stars were pinned. The oath was taken. The applause was genuine. Afterward, in a quiet moment away from the crowd, my mother found me. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Satisfied. Ready. And what? And human," she said gently. "Virginia, you've achieved something extraordinary. You're allowed to feel more than satisfied. You're allowed to feel proud, grateful, even joyful." I looked at her, this woman who'd spent 40 years as a military nurse, who'd raised me to value discipline and duty, who'd buried her husband 3 months ago and still found the strength to stand here supporting me. "I'm working on it," I said quietly. She smiled. "That's all I ask." That evening, alone in my apartment, I stood at the window overlooking the city. 2 stars on my collar now. Director of Joint Intelligence Operations. The culmination of 23 years of service, from cold water training to combat operations to command leadership. I thought about the briefing room, the coffee pot, the ring on my finger. The moment everything shifted. They'd thought I was pouring coffee. I'd been pouring restraint. And restraint, in uniform, was power. The transformation had taken years. Not revenge, but restoration. Not proving worth, but building systems that made worth irrelevant. Creating structures where competence determined value, where performance earned respect, where the work mattered more than the whispers. I'd done that. The systems held. The next generation stood straighter. But Tessa was right. So was that retired captain. Excellence in one area didn't require emptiness in others. My father had believed it did, and maybe that belief had limited him in ways I was only now beginning to understand. I didn't have answers yet, but I recognized the question. And recognizing the question, I'd learned, was always the first step toward finding solutions. The next morning, I entered the briefing room as director for the first time. 15 officers stood as I walked in, representing all branches of service. Some I'd worked with for years. Others were new assignments, officers I'd selected personally for their competence and character. I set my materials on the table and looked at them. They waited in silence, attentive, professional. Ready. Sit, I said. They sat. I didn't begin with pleasantries or mission statements. I began with the work. Intelligence coordination across joint operations currently operates at 87% efficiency. Our target is 95%. The gap represents systemic delays in information sharing between theater commands. We're going to close that gap. Here's how. For the next 90 minutes, I outlined new protocols, identified bottlenecks, assigned responsibilities. The officers took notes, asked clarifying questions, offered suggestions. It was everything a command meeting should be: focused, efficient, collaborative. As the meeting concluded, I noticed something. A young Navy lieutenant in the back row, taking notes, but also watching me with careful attention. Not the watchfulness of suspicion, but of study. Learning not just the protocols, but the approach. After the others filed out, she approached me. "Admiral Vale," she said. "Permission to ask a question?" "Granted." "How did you build this?" "The entire intelligence coordination system." "Where did you start?" I studied her for a moment. Lieutenant Junior Grade Sarah Chin, according to her name tape. Recently transferred from Signals Intelligence, top marks in her technical training, recommended by 3 separate commanders. "I started with a problem that needed solving," I said. "Then I solved it. Then I documented the solution so others could replicate it." That's it. That's the technical answer. The real answer is that I refused to accept inefficiency as inevitable. I treated poor coordination as a solvable problem, not a cultural reality. She nodded slowly. And when people resisted, I demonstrated results. Resistance to change is natural. Resistance to proven success is rare. "Thank you, Admiral." She turned to leave, then paused. "May I ask one more question?" "Go ahead." "Did you always know you'd end up here?" "In command?" "I considered that." "No. I knew I'd do the work well." "The command came because the work spoke for itself." She smiled slightly, saluted, and left. I gathered my materials and returned to my office. On my desk, amid the operational reports and intelligence briefs, sat a small envelope. Inside was a note from Tessa. "Congratulations on your first day as director. Don't forget to eat lunch. Don't forget you're human. Don't forget that excellence includes rest. Your friend, Tessa." I smiled despite myself. She knew me too well. That afternoon, I did something unusual. I left the office at 1700 hours, drove to a park near the river, and walked for an hour. No phone calls, no briefings, no operational planning. Just walking, watching the water, letting my mind settle. It felt strange at first. Inefficient. But gradually, I recognized the value. Rest wasn't weakness. It was maintenance. Even the best systems needed downtime to remain effective. When I returned home, I called my mother. "How was your first day?" she asked. "Productive." "Of course it was. Did you do anything else?" "I went for a walk." There was a pause. "Really?" "Tessa's influence." My mother laughed, a sound I hadn't heard much since my father's death. "Good. She's a good influence. She's persistent. That's why she's good for you." We talked for 20 minutes about small things. Her garden, the weather, a book she was reading. Normal conversation, the kind I rarely made time for. When we hung up, I felt something unfamiliar. Not satisfaction or completion, but something gentler. Connection, maybe. The weeks settled into a new rhythm. Morning briefings, operational planning, mentorship sessions, policy development. But also, weekly lunches with Tessa, monthly dinners with my mother, occasional walks by the river. Small adjustments to a life that had been built entirely around duty. The systems I'd created continued functioning at high efficiency. Mission success rates remained strong. The next generation of intelligence officers developed competence and character. The work continued. But I was learning something my father never had, that excellence didn't require sacrifice of everything else. That rest enhanced performance rather than diminishing it. That personal connection strengthened leadership rather than weakening it. 6 months into my new role, Lieutenant Junior Grade Sarah Chin requested a mentorship meeting. I approved it immediately. "Admiral," she said when she entered my office, "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For showing me what leadership looks like. Not the loud kind or the political kind. The competent kind." "You're welcome. I've been studying your career," she continued. "The SEAL training, the combat operations, the transition to intelligence, the systems you built. It's remarkable." "It's just work, Lieutenant." "No," she said firmly. "It's legacy. You've changed how joint operations function. That impact will last decades." I didn't respond immediately. Legacy wasn't something I thought about often. The work was the work. But she was right. The systems would outlast me. The standards would hold. The next generation would build on foundations I'd laid. "What do you want to know?" I asked. "How do I do what you did?" "Not the specific path, but the approach. How do I build something that matters?" I leaned back in my chair, considering the question carefully. "Start with the problem in front of you. Solve it better than anyone expects. Document your solution. Share it. Then find the next problem. That's it. That's the foundation. The rest is discipline, persistence, and refusing to accept mediocrity as inevitable. And when people dismiss you, when they underestimate you, let them," I said. "Their assumptions are their limitation, not yours. Focus on performance. Results speak louder than arguments." She nodded, absorbing this. "And restraint?" "I've heard people describe your leadership as restrained but powerful." "Restraint isn't weakness," I said. "It's precision. It's choosing your battles, conserving energy for what matters, and refusing to waste effort on proving yourself to people who aren't paying attention anyway." "Did you learn that in SEAL training?" "No. I learned it from my father. SEAL training just reinforced it." We talked for another 30 minutes. I shared specific examples, operational challenges I'd faced, and how I'd approached them. She listened with the kind of focus that indicated she'd remember every word. After she left, I sat quietly in my office. The sun was setting over the Potomac, casting long shadows across the command center visible through my window. Officers moved through the space below, executing the protocols I'd designed, upholding the standards I'd established. This was legacy. Not the rank or the ceremony, but the systems that functioned after you left the room. The standards that held when you weren't there to enforce them. The officers who stood straighter because you'd shown them what excellence looked like. I thought about the briefing room again. That moment when Major General Keane had recognized my ring, when everything shifted. Not because of what I did in that instant, but because of everything I'd already proven. They'd made me serve coffee. I'd served restraint instead. And restraint, properly applied, had built something that would outlast every person in that room. I closed my laptop and prepared to leave for the day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new operations, new opportunities to refine the systems and mentor the next generation. But tonight, I'd have dinner with my mother. I'd call Tessa. I'd rest. Because I'd finally learned what my father never had, that duty and life weren't opposites. They were partners. And excellence in one enhanced capacity for the other. The transformation was complete. Not the transformation from dismissed officer to command leadership. That had happened years ago in a briefing room with a coffee pot and a ring. This was a different transformation. From isolation to connection. From duty as burden to duty as purpose. From proving worth to simply being worthy. Still serving. Still building. Still leading with quiet fire. But now, finally, traveling lighter. Here's where I'll leave it. I didn't raise my voice, I raised the standard. If this resonated, tap like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's earning respect the quiet way. Questions for you. Have you ever been asked to serve when you were qualified to lead? What did you do? Where's the line between staying professional and setting a hard boundary? What's one time your work spoke louder than your title? If you've served, how has rank/role shaped the respect you get or don't? What would you have done in that briefing room when the coffee comment landed? What's one thing you'll change tomorrow to make your competence impossible to ignore? Drop your answers in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Your story might help someone else stand a little taller.